Alright guys, today we are going to go through a PowerPoint. I'm just going to give you the lecture today, and then we'll have an assignment maybe tomorrow on this, so be looking for this, but I don't want to overwhelm you in case you're still working on your China after World War II PowerPoint. So if you're still working on that, that's fine. Today is just listen and learn, okay? And then tomorrow we'll have a little assignment over this. But today we're just going to kind of reiterate some of the things that we've already talked about with brinkmanship and containment, and things that we've kind of talked about how the United States reacted to some of these things. This is a PowerPoint. It is posted on streaming for you. It is there, and I posted it on there for you. So if you need to make reference to this particular PowerPoint, you have access to it on Google Classroom. All right, we're going to talk about the word brinkmanship here for a second. Okay, the Soviet Union exploded their first nuclear bomb in 1949, and the U.S. becomes aware that they have, quote, the bomb. Okay, so again, we've talked about this a little bit, but just reiterating some of the important stuff here. We had the bomb after World War II, and we were the only ones, and we tried desperately to keep it a secret. But I told you a little bit about the Rosenbergs, who gave away the secret, and so as soon as they explode their first nuclear bomb, then we need to get busy on something bigger and badder, which is, what we began to do immediately after the Soviet Union exploded their nuclear bomb. So what we come up with is something called the H-bomb, and the H-bomb stands for hydrogen bomb, okay? And this is much more powerful than the atomic bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. The same scientists who developed the first bomb go to work on the hydrogen bomb. And they really thought that it could be outdone. And of course it is. So on November 1st, 1952, the United States detonated a hydrogen device in the Pacific. It vaporized more than an entire island. It was called Mike. That was the test code name for it. But when we say that the crater was more than a mile wide, what it does is create this big gigantic mushroom like this, and these are actual pictures from the sky of the hydrogen bomb being detonated, and they detonated it remotely by a ship many miles away from the island itself. It was an island that was uninhabited, obviously. We were testing it. We did not blow up anybody, but it was pretty severe. We had never used the hydrogen bomb in war, which is a good thing, okay, because it's pretty severe. This atoll was the island that we exploded. It was in the Marshall Islands, about 3,000 miles west of Hawaii. And again, they did it by remote control. And if you go on to Google, YouTube, you can watch a video of it. They actually have footage of us exploding Mike and seeing what it does, and it's pretty incredible, the force that it makes. Some of the effects of the hydrogen bomb: within 90 seconds, the fireball reached 57,000 feet. The cloud, when it reached its furthest extent, was 100 miles wide. Think about that. That cloud that you saw that I just showed you, over 100 miles. That's basically from Columbus to Cincinnati. So if you think about how far that is, that's how big that cloud reached. So it's an amazing device. And again, we've never used this, and I'm super glad that we haven't, because that would be pretty scary. The explosion wiped the island off the planet. There was nothing left, okay? They said there was, just stumps of vegetation. Fish were just like, with skin floating in the water, just bones floating in the water. So there really wasn't anything left of this island. So hopefully we never have to use this kind of device in war. Okay, did we have an advantage? Only temporary, okay? So if we exploded this thing in 1952. By 1953, the Soviet Union exploded their first H-bomb. Okay, so what you see here is what we call an arms race. Okay, by arms race, we're always trying to outdo each other. This is a big thing with the Soviet Union and the Cold War, is that we are always trying to outdo each other. Who has the biggest, the baddest weapons? All right, so that's important to understand. So our advantage was only 1 year, okay, and the Soviets then got a hold of their first H-bomb as well. Okay, now again, this is called brinkmanship, and this is the promise to go into all-out war, including use of nuclear weapons against any aggressive nation. So the idea that at any moment we could go to war with the Soviet Union, and people really believed that. Now, you guys, I had you guys watch that show, that silly PSA announcement called Duck and Cover, and hopefully you got a kick out of that, and that was kind of the point, to get a kick out of it. But seriously, people believed that we could go to nuclear war any day, okay, that this could happen, and people lived in fear, and that's why people built the bomb shelters and stuff, because they really believed that at any point in time we could go out to full-out nuclear war, and that life would be over as we know it. Not that ducking under your desk is really going to save you from a nuclear blast, okay, but it was, preparing for the worst. Okay, not that staying at home is really going to keep you from getting sick from all diseases either, but you do what you can. And so people were afraid, and people did what they could, and they built bomb shelters, and they kind of lived in fear that could happen. This cartoon down here is of Khrushchev and Kennedy. Now, Kennedy is our president in the United States, and after Stalin dies, this guy here, Nikita Khrushchev, takes over Russia. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll go back and talk about how Stalin dies and Khrushchev takes over. There was really a hope that Khrushchev would be better than Stalin. We all know Stalin was a creepy dude, but this guy wasn't a whole lot better, and he certainly carried on the belief that the Soviet Union would take over the United States. Okay. So this policy of brinkmanship and containment was continued. The policy used by Eisenhower was a policy of containment. And we've talked about containment, again, not to get rid of communism, but to keep it from spreading. And that was our goal throughout the Cold War, not to get rid of where it existed, but to keep it from spreading. And we had a couple leaks in our container, mostly in Asia. While our Truman Doctrine and our Marshall Plan were very successful in containing communism in Europe, and we've talked about that already, it was not so successful in other parts of the world. Okay, most Americans were convinced that nuclear war could happen anytime. Here's just some silly pictures of people building bomb shelters. We think it's silly, but truly, people were afraid, and this is what people did, and they sold these things. You could actually buy a kit from Sears and Roebuck to build your own bomb shelter in your backyard. Okay. All right. The CIA, you've probably heard of the CIA. It stands for the Central Intelligence Agency. So everyone knows the FBI. The CIA is sort of the FBI of the world. So while the FBI is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, is meant to sort of be the federal police of the United States, the CIA is the federal police of the world. Okay, so they're the spies. They're the ones you hear about, like the Jason Bourne movies, that go on out and spy on the world. The CIA was actually created to curb communism. Okay, they were out there to try to find out which countries were unfriendly, which countries were converting to communism, and it was sort of created in response to the Cold War. Of course, today we still have the CIA, not so much for communists, but any unfriendly nation, any nation that is up to no good doing these things. Okay. All right. we begin to see, again, the Cold War is a Cold War because we never directly go to war with the Soviet Union. But we do fight the Soviet Union in indirect ways. We call these wars of proxy or policies that try to curb the Soviet Union's power. Because after World War II, we really come down to two superpowers. It's us and the Soviet Union. And the rest of the world is going to be influenced either by us or the Soviet Union. So we're going to, spend our money to help these countries not be communist. And Soviet Union is going to do the opposite. They're going to go out and try to influence as many people they can and get the communism to spread to as many countries as they can and get those countries to be friendly to them so that they can ultimately control them. Okay, one of the examples is Iran. Iran, of course, is in the Middle East. In 1951, the Prime Minister of Iran began to nationalize oil fields, okay? And by nationalization, we mean we take them under government control, take them over like any communist. This is a very communist thing. So the British actually were the first ones to protest this, and they stopped trading oil with Iran to protest this action, to protest this sort of communist takeover of Iran. And this hurt the Iranian economy. So that was a good thing because that was what we were trying to do. However, the U.S. feared that the depression might lead to the Iranians going directly to the Soviets, since what they were doing was sort of communist anyway. So to stop this, we send millions of dollars. This has been our answer so far in a very peaceful way, is just to give money to these countries that are turning communist, because after all, that is what causes communism usually, is when there's not enough money and people are in desperate situations, and then communism sounds appealing to them. So to stop this, we give millions of dollars to a group that was against the government. Okay, so our thought was, hey, we'll just have this rebel group rise up and overthrow the bad government, and then because we gave them money, then they'll be pro-American, and we thought that would be a great way to do this. This is a dangerous game to play, boys and girls, because we know from experience that when you see rebel groups like this, that one group taking over another group isn't necessarily a good thing. Sometimes that can bite you in the butt, because you are supporting governments that are radical. And yes, you don't like the government that's in power now, but sometimes the new government can be just as bad, if not worse. However, in Iran, this actually worked. So the new government takes over Iran, and we have a pro-American government. So that's a good thing, okay? In this case, it works, but again, it's not always going to be the case, and this is going to fail in other countries that would try to do this, okay? For instance, Guatemala, okay? They were doing the same thing. We decided that we were going to have a U.S. trained army to overthrow the pro-Soviet president, to be replaced by a pro-American one. We'll give them weapons, we'll train them, we'll teach them how to be soldiers to overthrow this bad dude who is in power in Guatemala. However, the Guatemalan army refused to defend the president, and he did resign, and then they became dictators, okay? So this is exactly what I was talking about. So sometimes the new guys are just as bad as the old guys. Just because they're not Soviets doesn't mean they're not good, or pro-Soviet doesn't mean that they're good guys. And that's exactly what happened. So we gave them all this money, trained them with weapons and so forth. And then in the end, the Guatemalan army decides to do this, and it turns out bad for them. Okay? It's okay.
That's Daddy.
Just leave it. Okay?
Why is it Daddy's?
Because it is. Shh. All right. I'm trying not to stop this and make 2 videos, because once I do that, it takes a long time to download. All right. The Warsaw Pact. Stalin dies in 1953. So, yay, Stalin's dead. We all think this is a great thing. We're super excited that the guy is dead. We think perhaps this will be a good thing. The Soviets recognized West Germany and signed treaties with Austria and Japan. When West Germany was allowed to remilitarize and join NATO, the Soviet Union reacted and created the Warsaw Pact. So this was their reaction against NATO. So we create NATO, which you guys have already done an assignment on, which was, again, kind of an alliance against the Soviet Union. And then the Warsaw is created to counterbalance NATO. And this is Stalin's and the Soviets' response to this. Okay, and again, in 1953 Stalin dies. We think, yay, this is going to be a good thing. Turns out not so much. The guy who takes over for Stalin is not a good guy. Okay, all right, let's talk about the Geneva summit for a minute. And this is sort of a foreshadowing thing, because we're going to come back and talk about some of the things that happen here at the Geneva summit. Eisenhower put out an open skies agreement, which this is what he's proposing, all right? And it's simple. Look, we spy on you, you spy on us. We're not fooling each other. We know we spy and we check on each other. We fly flights over each other's country. We're spying on you, you're spying on us. Let's just agree to do it. If we have nothing to hide, then you can fly over us all you want and you will see that we have nothing to hide from you. So why don't you let us fly over you and check to make sure that we're okay, and we won't shoot each other down. That would be the agreement, and things would be fine. Well, the Soviets said nuh-uh, okay, because here's the problem with that. While we don't have anything to hide, we're pretty open with how we feel and do things. The Soviets are sneaky. We know this, and they do have things to hide, and so they reject the plan. They don't want any American planes flying over and doing this, okay? And again, this is foreshadowing, because we're going to come back and talk about where this comes in and bites us in the butt in just a few minutes. Okay. All right, the Suez War. This happens as you guys know, we have colonies, or the British have colonies over in Africa. And, you know, we built those rivers and dams to help trade and do those kinds of things. So we were hoping that things would stay open. However, some of these governments that took over after began to try to play us against each other. Now, Great Britain and the U.S. said that they would help Egypt pay for a dam in Egypt. Okay, Nasser, who was the head of the Egyptian government, tried to get as much money as possible, and he played the Soviets and Americans off of each other by bribing one and then the other, saying, "Oh, I'm pro-Soviet. You know, what can you do for me?" And then he would come to us and say, "Oh, I don't like the Soviets. You know, I want the Americans to help us." So he was playing us off of each other, and that's what I mean by that. Once we find out that, we're like, no, right? We don't play those games, okay? I would say, homie, don't play that, but you guys are too young to remember what that means. Okay, but we pull the plug on that whole deal. You don't try to play us against the Soviets. Wrong, okay? So, we decide that we're not going to play Nasser's game. Okay, so Nasser gets upset by this, okay? And he decides to go ahead and make lean towards the Soviets and take the Suez Canal, which was nationalized by Egypt government. Okay, it was owned by France and Great Britain for a long time. Okay, and this is a big slap in the face by the not by the Allies, but to the Allies. Okay, because again, number one, nationalizing is a very communist thing, and it hurt trade by everybody. And he refuses also to allow Israel to pass through the canal. So Israel, Great Britain, and France are really upset with this, and they send in troops to try to take the canal back. Okay, now the United Nations stopped the war and allowed Egypt to continue the canal because to control the canal, because at this point we're saying this is not worth a war. Okay, we do not want to go to war. If Nasser wants to play these games, if he wants to take the canal, let him have the canal. We're not going to war with this. This doesn't mean that the Soviets have control here. So again, in this respect, I guess you could say this was a failure in our containment. Okay, now Egypt doesn't become full-out communist, but this is certainly not a friendly government that we are going to feel happy with, okay? But we do not go to war over that particular thing. Okay, now, The Eisenhower Doctrine. Because the Soviets supported Egypt, many of the Middle Eastern countries supported the Soviet Union. So Eisenhower said, listen, okay, we let this containment leak here, but what we're going to do is defend any other Middle East country that comes against attack by a Soviet or communist country. Okay, so it's just our promise to go out there and defend any other Middle Eastern country that that is being threatened by communism. So we're kind of tightening down. So while we don't go to war over that, we do tighten down our containment policy on that. Okay. Now, this is kind of interesting because meanwhile, while we're sitting here and we are promising the Soviet or the Middle Easterns that we will defend them against any kind of uprising, here we have the Hungarians over in Europe, right next to the Soviet Union. Now, we know that Hungary was controlled by the Soviet Union directly after World War II. This was part of the satellite countries that belonged to Stalin at the end of World War II. And so they decide, hey, we don't want to be part of we don't want to be behind the Iron Curtain. We want to be part of the free Western Europe. So they have a little uprising in their own country in 1956. They want a democratic government. And the Soviets were quick to respond. They killed about 30,000 Hungarians for this rebellion. And the Soviets overthrew the new government as fast as it was set up. Now, this is really interesting. If we are having a policy of containment and we are promising the Middle East, oh, we'll defend you, we'll defend you, we'll defend you. What is our response to poor Hungary, who tried to become democratic? Are we going to rush in and help Hungary? And the answer is no, we don't. And here's why. Because what we say about this is not containment. Because remember, containment is not to get rid of communism that already exists. Containment is only to stop communism from going where it isn't. Okay? So think about this. Hungary was already communist. We're saying we can't help you because you were already part of the Soviet Union. You're not a country that is free and democratic that, the Soviets are threatening to take over. Now, I think this is a pretty lame response, but this is what we decide to do. Okay? So we let poor Hungary be, recaptured by the Soviets and taken over while we do nothing to defend their liberty. But again, our response to that is, well, you were already communist, and that does not fit the definition of containment and our response to containment. Okay? Now, I told you Stalin dies. Okay? So here's our new guy. His name is Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev. Okay, sounds very Soviet. All right, so after Stalin dies, the power was shared by an elite few. When Khrushchev takes over, again, we hope things would be better, but not so much, unfortunately. And then I told you we were in an arms race. Well, now we are in a space race. And again, it's this race to see which country can be the most technologically advanced, which country can have the biggest, baddest weapons, which country can do the most. So in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik, which is the first satellite, okay? And that's important to keep in mind. So they send up a satellite into space. Now, we have to react quickly to this. We cannot let the Soviets be more advanced than us. So we pour money into our space program, and our first satellite failed in 1958. So we again launch our first satellite a couple years later, and then we are the first to put a man on the moon. So while the Soviets are the first to orbit space, and they are the first ones to get a satellite up there, we are the first ones to put a man on the moon. But the reason we were in this big race to do this is because we had to prove that we were not just as superior as Russia, but more superior than Russia. We were constantly trying to outdo each other. Okay. Now, I told you about the Geneva Summit. Okay. I told you that we were trying to peacefully agree to spy on each other. Okay. Eisenhower said, look, you know, let's you know, spy on you. We've got nothing to hide. You should have nothing to hide in return. But the Soviets had refused that. Okay, so we decide that we are going to do it anyway. I mean, we're not going to stop spying on them. We were just hoping that we could do it openly. But because they said no, okay, fine. We have to go up and do it again. So we take these, we send these, this mission, these U-2 planes. And these U-2 planes are real quiet. They're, you know, they're jets. We've come a long way since, you know, even World War II with our big clunky planes. We've got these, you know, very modern jets now, and they're like spy planes, right? And they're pretty quiet. So we send on this mission with these U-2 planes where we could fly without being detected. And we take some pictures, you know, we're up there, we're snapping pictures as we fly over the Soviet Union. And what do we see? We see pictures of the Soviets moving troops and setting up missile sites. Uh-oh. Okay, so this is a big deal because boys and girls, they told us, you know, we have nothing to hide. We just want you to stay out of our business. Well, guess what? They do have something to hide. They have this big parade and they're setting up missiles and all this stuff. And we're thinking, uh-oh, this is bad. Okay, so we decide, oh, we need more proof. So we send up another U-2 plane to go over and make sure and confirm that this stuff is happening. However, on our last mission, we're discovered and the plane is shot down. And now they've got our guy. Okay, so Eisenhower tried to deny it happened, but it's a little hard to deny it happened when they have our pilot. Our pilot did not die, by the way. He was captured. And eventually he's going to be let go. But they do have our pilot. Okay, and you know, it's kind of hard to deny to Khrushchev that we were doing that. Now Khrushchev says, no, you must apologize. You know, you have to apologize to us. You are not to spy on us. Like, Eisenhower gets really mad at this. Okay, he's like, are you kidding me? I tried to do this openly. You wouldn't do it. Okay, we asked you, can we spy on each other openly? You said no. So why are you so angry at this? Just because we got caught doesn't mean you didn't do this. You're always spying on us. You have spies on us everywhere in the United States. So Eisenhower refuses to apologize. But we stopped the flights for a minute, okay? Now, again, this ticked off Khrushchev and renewed our confrontation between them, and things just got worse, okay? We did get our pilot back eventually, which is a good thing. But you know, we know they're up to no good. All right, they know that we know that they've got their missile sites and things are not good. Okay, so this kind of stuff did all, you know, what it did was heighten the Cold War. It just made people more scared and put us in a bigger state of panic, if you will. So that is our slides for today, okay? It talks about brinkmanship, talks about some of our policy of containment, talks about some of our heightened tensions between us, okay? So there's a lot of important information in this particular set of notes. So again, I just wanted you to hear it. Tomorrow you'll have an assignment, but I'm going to post this today so you guys can read the notes, and then hopefully tomorrow's assignment will just be super easy and you can breeze through it. I miss you guys, and I hope you're doing well.